Hi, hello. Welcome back to my corner of the internet. Welcome back to Summer Weenie. My name is Fats. Today I want to talk about the books that just didn't hit for different reasons. I have 3 very different books, and I have 3 very different complaints for each. I want to say that first, I do have Brat by Gabriel Smith. This is a literary horror story about who is a rather unlikable character dealing with the stages of grief, not only for the father that he has just lost, and we actually get to experience the funeral in the opening stages of this book, but also a mother who is living within a home and possibly the relationships around him. And you experience his struggle with his passion, writing, being an author. You experience his relationship with his brother. You get to witness what seems like his body shedding and body actually escaping itself, I would say, and him losing layers of himself and the body horror around that, and also what seems like the home falling apart around him. This is a story that it feels unfiltered. It feels like an unfiltered story, like you're given this muddy stream of water that has dirt, grit, gravel, and you sort of have to self-filter. You're swallowing down water and you can feel this grit on your tongue, but somehow it is still drinkable. That's kind of how this story feels. It feels unfiltered. It feels gritty. It doesn't feel viscous. That's why I want to say water with grit rather than like the viscosity of having something else within it or feeling thick. It flows choppily, I would say. It feels like runoff. That's the best way I can describe this one. The other book that I want to talk about today is Our Winter Monster, which is honestly just hot garbage as a narrative piece. You have a couple who goes on a vacation in a snowy mountain town, and oh no, there's a monster and possibly a serial killer on the loose. And then when the reckoning comes, I think my complaint isn't so much in the story itself. The intent that the author had and what the author wanted to do was accomplished beautifully. I think my problem here is how that intent presented itself in resolution. I think that's my problem. So my issue is essentially the ending. But this one opens up with a woman who is returning home to go to a childhood friend's wedding that is set on a refurbished plantation that does reenactments, that does its best to preserve that part of life. And safe to say the ancestors aren't crazy about that. I'm going to spoil all of these books, so if you don't want spoilers or talking about the ending, just kind of maneuver your way through the chapters. I'm going to make sure that I put chapters in here for the people. I think I want to start Brat, go hot garbage, and then end on When the Reckoning Comes. I think that's the best order for this. So this story is an embedded story. So I'm going to give you the first couple pages and then I'll tell you what it's about. And then I'm going to give you the last couple pages because they're very relevant to everything that's going on. I was in the waiting room. Then I was in the examination room. There was a chair and another chair and a hydraulic doctor bed. Sit down, the doctor said. I don't know where. Not on the bed, he said. I sat on the chair. I think I have a concussion, I said. Why do you think that? The doctor said. My nephew hit me. He hit you? In the nose, then in the back of the head. How old is he? The doctor said. 14, I said. Okay, he said. Take off your shirt. Really? I said. Sure, the doctor said. I unbuttoned my shirt. He shone a light in my eyes. The light was on the end of a cone. The cone was set at 90 degrees on the end of a metal rod. It looked like a thing dentists use for looking at mouths. No concussion, the doctor said. It didn't seem like he could tell just by shining a cone in my eyes. Looks like you have a little eczema here, though, he said. He pointed to my chest and spun away in his chair. I looked down at myself. There was a red patch and what looked like a slightly raised piece of dead skin in the center of my chest, just to the right of where I assumed my heart was. Okay, I said. Don't worry, he said, looking at his computer. Very treatable. I'm writing you a prescription for hydrocortisone cream. Don't you mean hydrocortisone? Yes, he said. Hydrocortisone. That's what I said. My brother's wife, when I was back at the house, said I shouldn't have provoked him. He's very sensitive, she said. What? I said. I didn't provoke him. He loved your dad, my brother's wife said. They had a real connection. I don't see what that has to do with anything. Are you really going to wear that outfit? She said. I was wearing a t-shirt with lots of Phils on it. Phil Leotardo, Phil Neville, the Philippines, the concept of philanthropy, Philadelphia, the spread, the Philharmonic, Prince Philip. What? I said. No, I am going to wear a suit. It has a stain on it. You can't wear that. I am going to change, I said. My brother walked into the kitchen and kissed his wife on the forehead as she walked out of it. He started doing something in a cupboard. You should wear the Phil t-shirt to Dad's funeral, he said. I'm going to change, I said, and left the room. I looked at myself in the half-steamed bathroom mirror. This was the house I grew up in. The doctor was right about the skin on my chest, just to the right of where I assumed my heart was. It looked all weird. I picked at the skin. It came away painlessly, just a little at first. It made a thick and translucent white flap. I flicked at it with my fingernail. I pulled at it, more pulled away like damp paper, over my left nipple, then right up to my armpit. It started to sting a little, like it was meant to stay on. I stopped tearing myself. The skin just hung there. Then I kept going. I couldn't walk around with half my chest hanging off me. Safe to say that this book is body horror. Now, you got the beginning of the story. He eventually ends up going to this funeral. He picks a fight with somebody else. She decks him. It's this old, 60-year-old woman that only wears purple that came to the funeral. One of the neighbors knocks him out. Now, as the story continues, they need somebody to get the house ready to be sold. Later, we are going to find out that the older brother is hard for money. He needs some money. They're struggling a little bit. They're pinching pennies. So that he is the one mostly pushing that this house should be sold. Gabriel, our main character, whose skin is flaking away, volunteers to stay at the house and get it ready, clean it up, do whatever. However, he seems a little bit more focused in growing, taking care of, and maintaining the cannabis plants that he found of his father's in the attic. He doesn't really spend much of his time actually cleaning up the home. He, in addition to those cannabis plants, he holds a lot of interest in a manuscript that he finds within the home that is constantly changing. He tries to ask his mom about this. He tries to ask others about this. He just wants an answer to this story that every time he goes back to it, it adjusts, it shifts, it changes a little bit. Gabriel himself is also a writer. He got an advance of $50,000, I believe, to write the next book, but he's sort of in a rut. He's not moving forward in it. He spends a lot of time in the home, drinking, and getting high in any way that he can, and just kind of glazing through his life at this point. He has just recently gotten out of a relationship, actually, and his ex is an author as well. You do have several sections within this book where you are reading other people's writing. I personally always struggle with that inclusion. I always think it takes a really talented author to have stories within a story and characters within that. I think it's done best when an author is able to bring in different writing styles, bring in different voices, bring in different technicalities. It takes talent to do that. As you saw in the reading that I did do, the literary choppiness of this was throughout. These other inclusions of stories, that writing didn't change. It maintained. So you had one voice, I would say, throughout this, even though you had manuscripts and stories and storytelling and clips, it kept that same voice throughout. Now, back to his ex. In the story, he sees that his ex has just published a little bit of a little story. Him and her aren't talking, but he hunts the story down. And it's called Cum Tributo. It is a story of a Russian oligarch who made his money in oil. And like all oligarchs, he happened to collect art on the side. Well, one day at a party, he's in the back room getting serviced. And in an attempt to relieve himself on this woman's face, it flies past her head and lands on a painting. And he gets obsessed with it. He starts collecting paintings and adding pieces of himself onto these paintings and loving that he can mix himself onto this art and tarnish it or add to it or change it, all without people knowing. There is one day where this obsession sort of explodes, but since he's such a well-known guy, people don't know yet, but he gets a behind-the-scenes after-hours pass to go to a museum and see paintings unobserved. Well, mid-pleasure, he trips over himself and steps past the security detailing of a painting. Security runs in and finds him in a compromising position. And it sort of just gets silenced. Not many people talk about it. He is a very well-known guy. He is a huge player in the art world. It just gets brushed under a rug. A little tap on the wrist. Please, let's not catch you doing this again. This Russian oligarch passes in a boating accident, which is supposedly an accident. No idea. But it ends with this thought of all of these paintings just being in circulation with his DNA on top of it. This idea of if you took a black light, you would see grossness. It was around this point that I didn't know if I was just too dumb for this book, because for that story to take up so many pages, I don't know if I was supposed to laugh, to take meaning, what to do with this story written by the ex of Gabriel, my main character, going through grief. Grieving everything. Because I would say that there is a grief period to an ended relationship. So it's not just the lost father, it's not just the mother whose humanity you're seeing, whose fragility you're starting to see, but also this end of a possible life. He's dealing with so many different versions of grief. In theory, I would say I relate to this grief, but I never related to the story. Like in theory, these are griefs that I get, but there was never a point where I was reading this book and I was like, oh, I see myself, or I feel this, or I understand this. There was thematic intent that this author really wanted to get across, with the symbolism of peeling off his skin, with the X, with writing, with all of these things. The author wanted to get across an idea and get across a motif, which was very, I would say, very heavy-handed. And it was odd to have something so heavy-handed that I never felt connected to. Anyways, back to the story. So Gabriel's living in this house and he's supposed to be cleaning up. The house itself is like falling apart around him. However, there's a few things happening at the same time as this. And I would say this is where the choppiness of the story really happens because not only is the style choppy, but the way all these snippets of what's happening just didn't feel cohesive. They felt very oil and water, like several droplets of oil were how this story felt, just floating around in water, but never quite coming together, bouncing off of one another. You have a video that Gabriel finds that hints at his mom possibly having like a secret life or a second family. You have a man dressed as a deer who lives in the shed and helps out in the garden. You have this disintegrating home. You have his skin falling off. You also have Gabriel meet this young boy and girl. So he heads to a gas station one day, and outside of this gas station are this young boy and this young girl who are asking him to buy cigarettes for them. He buys the cigarettes, takes them back to the house, and the boy is like, oh, I've got some cool pills. Do you want a few? They drink. He tries these illicit pills. He passes out. He wakes back up. He sees that they have left. He bounces in and meeting them or not meeting them. And they are almost ghostly, I would say, in their presence in the story, because Gabriel thinks that they have something to do with this manuscript that he's found that keeps changing, and possibly the second family that his mom might have had, but also like parallel universes, maybe. And they also give him this warning about not selling the house. There's not much that I get from them as an inclusion. They just seem dissonant. They felt like they were thrown in to push some ideas forward. But I couldn't, again, make anything out of them. The way the story then comes to an end is the eldest brother, who was hard on money, says that they can move some things around and they don't have to sell the house, because after Gabriel came across this manuscript and this idea of parallel universes, he didn't want this to go. He felt like he could not get rid of this home because of something. But the story ends with this resolution of getting to keep the home. But the reason I read you the beginning was here is the ending. That night, I dreamed I was in a New York hotel. Stories above all of Manhattan. Out of the hotel windows, I could see the whole sky and its lights. My mother was there. So was my brother. We were in the living room in a suite waiting for something. There was a sliding door in the hotel room. We were all so happy, my brother, my mother, and me, talking and laughing about things that had happened to us. And we all remembered to pass the time while we waited. And at some point, while we were laughing, the sliding door to the bedroom opened and I saw my father there. But not quite my father, the younger, trimmer, cleaner version of my father. My child version of him that I'd forgotten about. He looked so sheepish and confident and handsome. He didn't look at me. He was looking out the window at all of the lights, like time-stuck falling stars, lighting his rolled-up cigarette. My brother said, "Guess it's my turn." My brother went into the bedroom where my father was waiting for him. And the sliding door closed, and that was the last I saw of them both. And I knew that Dad was telling my brother something really important in there, and that it was my turn to hear the important thing next. And right then I realized it was a dream. And I was desperate to see Dad and talk to him and hear the important thing. And I tried so hard to stay in the dream. I tried and tried and tried. I wanted to see Dad so much. I tried so hard. But my eyes opened and my brother was gone and my mother was gone and Dad was gone completely. And here it was, sunshine and day. I dressed and went downstairs. I felt hungry, but in a good way. I don't remember when the last time I'd eaten was, and it doesn't seem to matter. I looked in the fridge. The fridge was full of groceries from supermarket time. I took butter from the fridge and I took eggs. I took beautiful red and yellow tomatoes. Basil that smelled pepper sweet, rosemary. I washed it all down with coffee and sparkling water from a cold and blue can. Then I sat there for a bit and thought about my dad. Then I decided to get to work. So I took my laptop into my mother's study and deleted all the emails from my agent. Then I went into my bank account and sent almost all of the book money to my brother, saying with a note, "Rent." Then I went downstairs into my father's study. I collected as many of his papers as I could carry and took them all up to my mother's study. Then I collected all my favorite house books from their shelves and boxes and took them up to my mother's study too. Then I set all the papers and books down on my mother's desk and opened my mother's manuscript at the first page so that I could copy from that and my father's papers and all my favorite house books easily. Then I began to type. I was in the waiting room. Then I was in the examination room, which is our very first line of the book. That's why I say, I think, okay, grief as a theme. Grief is something that feels cyclic and monotonous and pointless and directionless and difficult to grasp. Grief is such a difficult feeling of just banging your head against the wall over and over and over and over. And this book felt like that. So I get what it intended. I get what it wants. However, I feel like with a lot of literary books, it's forgotten that this is a book. And while it is not the author's intent to entertain, I do think there does need to be thought to consumption of, because how this is written, how these themes come about, how it's just sort of pieced together thematically as an abstract concept, it does what it intends. It does. I can see like, dang, this does feel like a stage of grief. This dislikable character, this peeling of the skin, this losing yourself, this almost cocooned feeling of the past you, before and after grief. I get all of that. But as a reading experience, I do think that's not all books need to be the same. Not all authors need to write the same. But as a reader of something meant to be consumed, it's something to say for like going to those restaurants where they make something that looks beautiful, but I don't enjoy the taste. They make something that conceptually works, but I don't enjoy the taste of the food. I feel that way about a lot of literary books and being in the literary reading community, because I struggle talking sometimes to other people that read litfic, because I get that it has a goal. But have you seen that thing where it's like, sometimes the yellow door is just yellow? Of course you can glean meaning from a whole bunch of words put together. Of course I can put together a meaning of something if I force my brain to do it. But as a book, I do think that sometimes we need to be a little bit harsher with like, did the book accomplish an abstract thing? And at the same time, was it consumable? I don't. Recent disappointment. I didn't bring over coffee or water or anything today, and I can feel myself fighting for my life. Before I move on, I do have a note that I did leave that I think was just me trying to figure out how I felt. And I did want to emphasize, within this book, there is a childish nature to Gabriel, my narrator of the story, and his humor and incessant use of slurs. There was a crude nature to this that I didn't laugh at, and I don't know if I was meant to. because there was this sort of high school boy feeling to some of the things that he was saying, or some of the ways that him and his brother would banter. And I would just sort of be like, ugh, like it added to my dislike of this character, if I'm going to be real. I also said here that the existential angst of this character was also very high schooler coded. Oh, and a few words that I used, just my chaotic notes of how I felt about this style. It felt tedious, stilted, layered, glitchy, complex, and claustrophobic. Complex isn't always a compliment. I do want to emphasize that. I think in the reading community, when we say something is complex, it's often used just kind of like vaguely as a compliment of. I don't think complexity means good. I think it can be a complex story and that work against it. That's how I feel about this here. A Winter Monster by Dennis Mahoney was honestly just the most wild amounts of hot garbage that I've read. But, and you know what's frustrating? Sometimes I read hot garbage and I'm like, why did I finish it? Why did I just let my anger fuel me to the end? You know, because I love a DNF. You know that about me. I'm going to DNF for the fun of it. I have no idea why I kept going with this, and I'm more upset that I did. Let's see how quickly I can tell you what happens in this book so that you don't have to waste your time reading it. You have Brian and Holly, who are going on a getaway trip into the snowy mountains. One of the first interactions that you get from Brian and Holly, you can tell that their relationship is on the rocks because Brian is looking out the window. It's snowing horribly. And he goes, man, I really thought our getaway would be at a beach or something. And Holly was like, oh, we don't have the money for a beach, so I booked this. So off rip, you get this feeling that Holly is making these decisions and not communicating like she's a part of a partnership. Because what do you mean you thought we would be going on a beach and she's just informing you that she made this decision? Whatever. You feel that tension. A storm is rolling in. Holly's vision is so poor trying to drive down this road. She asks Brian to stick his head out of the window and direct her and just make sure that he can see. Brian looks out and he says, something's chasing us. Something's coming. And then you get this sort of chaotic scene of Brian possibly getting flung from the car, Holly possibly getting flung away, them rolling around, and then you wake up with Brian alone. We don't know where Holly is. We don't know why they're separated. But a good chunk of this story is Brian and Holly walking around in the snow, scared of this monster. You have these gory scenes of this monster killing people. This monster has like ice powers and he freezes a man's arm off and rips this guy's arm off. Brian and Holly are just racing and running and trying to get free. In the midst of that, you have a few other things happening with this story. You have a detective who last year had a couple go missing. And this year, hearing what's happened to this couple, she's like, is this the same thing? Is something happening with couples out here? And then you also have like our detective also has like relationship issues and trust issues. And also she's dealing with being a Black woman in a male dominated field. That is a theme that's also just tossed in. You have that. You also have flashbacks to Brian and Holly's relationship. And the way this is presented is every time you get a flashback, it gives you a countdown. It's always saying things like 7 days until the bad date. You get another flashback and it's 6 days until the bad date. You get another flashback, and it's like 5 days until the bad date. So you're feeling this sense of, what is this bad date? And is this bad date what is hindering this couple? Is this bad date what has brought them to this trip? Where is this monster? What is going on? What happened to the couple from last year? Right? That's all you're experiencing. Brian and Holly running around. The detective poorly detectiving. And flashbacks. About 65 or 70% of the way through, you find out that Holly and Brian are the monster. Because Holly sees Brian and she sees him like transform into this ice thing. And she's like, oh my goodness, it's us. You become the monster and then I become the monster and then you become the monster and then I become the monster. That's what they find out. So then they link up and they're just trying to get out. They don't want anybody to know that they're out here killing people. They don't want anybody to know that they're the monster. So they link up and they almost hitch a ride with this guy, the snowplow guy, but they don't. They run off. The detective almost gets them. That's the story, right? This all leads up to you finding out what happened on the bad date. And on this bad date, they're in the parking lot, and a man comes up behind Brian and like, that's what happens. Mind you, this led to my frustration because as you're in this relationship, Holly's narrative of everything is Brian is acting weak. Brian is really into himself. Brian has lost his confidence. I don't like this guy anymore. He's not pushing to grow at his job anymore. And finding out that Brian went through something horribly traumatic and linking that to how Holly has spoken about him this entire book made me feel so much disgust in Holly. Like disgust. But this book wasn't written in a way that the author wanted me to feel that. I just, using my 2 brain cells, was like, oh, I can't believe that we wrote this type of character. Because the reason I say I'll get to it in a second of why I don't think the author intended me to hate Holly as much as I did. But a couple of other bylines. The couple that went missing, snowplow guy that was giving people rides. He's like he wanted to be a serial killer or something. I don't know. That couple was literally in a secret basement of his home, just starving and cold. And the detective found them in the last page of the book. Like, the mystery thriller, I think it's supposed to be a thriller, find a serial killer. I didn't get that at all in this book. I didn't feel that at all. It was just kind of thrown at me. The detective is like, what's happening with this couple? You've got a monster going around. And they're like, oh, no. By the way, this was actually a serial killer hunt. BT dubs. That thrown in, ridiculous, dumb, stupid. I wasn't in that. The detective chapters, I would actually like to say, like, as I was reading this, I thought the detective chapters dragged. I was so tired. When I would get a chapter with our detective, I was like skimming the chapters. So for this story to end and it be like, guess what? They got the guy. I was like, what? When did we were looking for the guy? I thought like a monster killed them because I was so focused on the concept of there being a monster. And then these two were just like, it's us. Now here's why I don't think the author wanted me to feel so disgusted by Holly as a human being. The way this was resolved was, let's see if I can find the page. It's literally the dumbest thing I've ever read in my entire life. Okay, so Holly and Brian are talking to each other, right? And they're talking about how when they turned into monsters, they lost chunks of time, how they don't know what's going on, whatever. That's what these two are talking about here. Maybe if we talk it all through, Brian says, we'll fill each other's blanks, remember for each other. We never really did that after the bad date, Holly says. We shared an awful night, but then we didn't really share it. I couldn't imagine what you were going through. I couldn't imagine what you were going through either. I didn't want to ask. Why? You needed so much help at first. Once you seemed stable, you didn't want to see me fall apart. I didn't want myself to fall apart, Holly says. Everything was telling me to keep moving forward. I was doing so well. At least I told myself I was. All my old fears, insecurities, and weaknesses, they seemed to go away. They just felt silly. Once I tackled an assailant and killed him barehanded, I thought, well, F, because you remember how I said Brian was attacked? Holly saved him. Holly is the one that saved Brian. I can handle winter blues. I can face down challenges at work, no problem. I didn't want to lose that and start going backward. And I was in a tailspin and couldn't stop following. I didn't want to pull you down with me, Brian says. I was counting down the days thinking you should leave. You wanted that? Holly, shut the F up. This man almost lost his life in an attack. It's amazing he got out of the bed any day after that. You wanted that? Shut up. Oh my God. No, but I hated being bad for you. Like, Brian, I had a realization after therapy one day. For a whole year, we each lived with the only person who remembered the worst night of our lives. No one could have helped us more to put it all behind us, but no one could have hurt us more with nonstop reminders. We were the best thing for us and the worst thing for us, and here we are again, trauma number 2. Trauma number 2 being what, the monster? Killing everybody? Evidence or not, Holly says, we're to blame. I didn't mean to kill Vance. You didn't mean to kill Cookie. But we knew we were struggling for the past 12 months. We didn't do enough to pull ourselves together. We couldn't have predicted we'd turn into a snow monster. Smart. Good job, Brian. We should have guessed something would eventually explode. Okay, but not a snow monster. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It was something that's not turning into a snow monster. I'd love to think we've learned how to deal with this better, but I'm pretty sure tonight made things worse. It's different now. How? And then they talk about how, like, going back to work was a struggle, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, Brian says, we should talk more, like seriously talk. And Holly's like, I'll wake you up when I have nightmares. And Brian says, you have nightmares? Holly responds, all the time. Don't assume I'm always doing great because I'm not. This book is a metaphor for working through your problems and talking. You know what you don't hear? Any resolution to the fact that these two people turn into murderous monsters. This book ends by going, I'm so sorry, I love you. I love you too. I'll do better. Okay. You're a monster. People have died. What do you mean? What is happening? Stupidest, just the dumbest book. And I've been chasing, what was it last year? Last Summerween, I read Devolution. Such a fun, good read. Please read it. I've been chasing that high for ages, and I thought this one would give it to me. And I think what this taught me, I'm just going to have to give up on that. I had a great book. I'm not going to try to chase that high because then I get stuff like this. Hot, flaming garbage. All right, we're at the final book. And I want to emphasize with this book, my complaint has nothing to do with how the story is told. It has nothing to do with the writing style. It has everything to do with the resolution and the implications around the resolution. But let me try to briefly tell you what happens, because if you haven't read it, you won't understand my complaint. So I'm just going to try to quickly and briefly piece it together for you. You have Mira, who gets a call from out of the blue from her childhood friend, Celine, inviting her to the wedding. But as kids, you had this friend group: Celine, Mira, Jessie. Celine was the poor white girl who grew up in the black neighborhood. Mira came from a family that had a very tough relationship with the town because their slave history is very deep in the roots of this town. And then you have Jessie, who kind of fell into friendship with them. You actually find out about this friendship as Celine and Mira had been sitting on the bus. Mira used to get bullied because people thought it was so funny that she chose to sit near the front of the bus. So bullying that day fell on Celine because she sat next to Mira, and then it just sort of escalated because they were together. In that day, Jessie was like, hey, you guys, stop bullying them. And he came up and sat next to them. That is the day that started their little friendship. But there actually comes a day when Jessie says that they should go into the woods to check out Woodsman Plantation, which is allegedly haunted by slaves. Celine refuses. However, Mira has a little bit of a crush on Jessie, so what he says, she's like, okay, fine. They go up. They're coming up, they pass a tobacco barn that's sort of decrepit, and they come up to this woodsman house, the Woodsman Plantation, known for a very gruesome revolt, an uprising of slaves, and also all the aftermath that comes with a slave uprising. As they get to the home, Jessie punches in a window. He completely ignores his bleeding arm because he just wants to get photos inside the house. Jessie did photography. It was a passion of his. As they're exploring the home, they hear a noise, they hear a crash. Mira says that she doesn't want to look anymore. She would prefer to stand outside. Jessie says he'll continue to explore, and just she can be a lookout. Mira sees a man coming towards her. He's bleeding all over his face. She screams and she runs, just runs home, sprints as fast as she can. By the time she hobbles herself home, Jessie has already beat her there. And he's sitting and he's waiting for her, and he's like, don't worry about it. I thought I saw something. Did you see something? They don't really talk about it. He goes home for the night. A few days later, a body washes up around the plantation, and word gets out that Jessie had been around that plantation that night, and police take him in as prime suspect for this murder because they found blood in his area. They do eventually release Jessie. However, that sort of hangs over him and how people treat him in town because it wasn't resolved. So they just sort of ostracize him and lay blame on him in town. It is all of this that actually partially led to Mira wanting to get out of her hometown, move away, never come back. So the only reason she is coming back is Celine inviting her to this wedding. Back to the present. The Woodman property is a plantation reenactment. It's refurbished. You have employees that work around in their little... they're not dressed in rags, so it is a softened version of slavery, and that they do have their smocks and they are washing clothes. They're working amongst the fields. They act as if you are in a plantation home. There isn't too much interaction from guest to slave. It's just kind of like they exist in the background doing these tasks. Well, the night before the wedding, Celine goes missing, and people are scouring the plantation, scouring the lands. Mind you, Jessie was invited. In the chaos that is hunting for Celine, somebody comes forward, Celine's dad, and says, There's the murderer from back in the day. He's probably the one that killed Celine and took her. And they blame Jesse. Whatever. Well, let's get to Jesse and Mira. Jesse happens to be an employee at the plantation. He works as part of the reenactment. Well, Mira wants to pull him aside. She wants to talk to him. She still has like a little bit of feelings for him. A soft spot, a crush that never went away. That attraction is still very much there. He pulls her aside and he tells her that, hey, I've been looking into the history of this place, and the reason I work here is I have a theory. There are always these huge accidents, and a lot of death surrounds that plantation whenever somebody who is a descendant of the cruelties that occurred here comes to stay. And this wedding has brought quite a few of those people. So he thinks that there is going to be a supernatural thing that occurs where people pass, or you lose people, or there's an accident, or there's something that's going to occur. Mira opens up about how she's been getting visions and she's been seeing ghosts around the plantation. And Jesse says, like, I believe you. I fully believe you, because back in the day, when you and I had gone to check out the Woodman house, he had flashed a photo. And he just recently, as an adult, got that film developed. And in the photo, you can see a little girl, a little ghost girl. And that is what kicked off his interest in whatever is happening on this plantation. Well, back on the plantation, Celine's body is found, face down in a field with her dress bunched around her waist. And the crowd becomes like an angry mob wanting Jesse. As this story continues, you have Mira, who has these slave visions, right? And she sees who she believes is an ancestor. She follows her to get some answers. Maybe she can prevent this horrible thing from happening that might happen. If she can get some answers, provide people, these slaves, the resolution that they need, right? When Mira follows her ancestor, she comes upon a home and she witnesses face to face these assault parties on female slaves from white men. And she's in that house. She's hearing screaming. She's hearing doors shut. She's witnessing this live time. As she runs away from this, she bumps into Jesse. And she's talking about, like, maybe we need to make it to the water. Let's make it to the water. They're leading me to the water. They run out to the water. They're going. The mob is chasing them as well. Jesse is in danger. Now, here is where I'm going to so poorly explain this ending, but just try to keep up with me. Mira keeps saying, like, so many slaves lost their lives in this river, trying to escape, trying to get out. There needs to be some sort of resolution. I think they're leading me here. So they run out there. Jesse has his back turned to her at one point. Mind you, there's an angry mom that wants Jesse. Who knows what's going on? Mira sees her ancestor ghost, like, waving her over. And Jesse can't come with. So she follows her ancestor ghost and bumps into Celine's was going to be soon to be husband. And in a conversation back and forth, you find out he is the one that killed Celine in an argument where she said maybe she doesn't love him. Like, Celine was getting cold feet. And he killed her. And he just kind of, like, let everybody blame Jesse and have that anger towards Jesse. You have that conversation, You have a lot of screaming, a lot of fighting. The mob shows up. Jesse runs away. Jesse escapes. All this happens. People shoot at him. Whatever. When you get to the end of this book, it seems as if this lesson, what needed to happen was Mira needed to come to terms and stop running away from her own history. She needed to recognize that this is who she is, recognize that this is part of her past. She just stopped running away from it and face it head on and not feel scared or ashamed of it, but recognize that this is her history, right? I feel odd that the resolution of so much of this was our Black character needed to witness something so wildly horrifying in order to accept it as part of herself. Having to go back to that home and witness that level of atrocity, to see all of this pain over and over. None of our white characters saw this pain. None of our white characters had to recognize the hurt that they've caused. It was our Black character accepting a painful past. Are you seeing why, like, something about this theme and idea being how we resolve the story? Why is it on my, like, yes, being Black does involve a large part of like coming to terms with your past. I personally, I'm going to say something. I don't enjoy, and that's the word I want to use. I don't enjoy. I don't feel entertainment in, and I don't get enjoyment from books that portray those kinds of scenes. Those books that have me as a reader reliving those kinds of scenes, and then the lesson being like, you gotta know this is part of your past. This is important for you. You are this trauma. I know. I don't feel enjoyment or entertainment in something like this. And I know it's a horror book. Is it horrifying? Yes, but I always struggle reading Black-centered books that put this in my face. And I think it's because I read for escapism a lot of the times. Do I use my brain when I read? Yeah. But something about the reality of this and how horrifying these scenes were, I was reading it like, as a reader, I don't want to do this. As a reader, I'm not having, but then like for the message to be, you have to, you gotta look at this face to face. This is who you are. I don't have to. I don't know. This is one I'm on the fence of, but I also think, me personally, I do struggle with books that take on themes like this and put them in my face as in such a horrifying way. I'm not sure. That is all I have for you. I need a glass of water so badly. I am parched. I am dry. Please let me know if you read any of these. Especially give me some thoughts and feels on this one. This is the one that I'm the most, because reading Goodreads reviews, it is well liked in the Black community, and I don't know. Please talk to me about it. Please tell me how you feel. Please tell me all your thoughts and feelings. I hope you're reading good books. And I'm going to talk to you next time.